Hello everyone, this is JinJinx, one of the Monster Hunter math guys. So in our last two videos we have covered the meta bow sets for Monster Hunter World until Iceborne comes out. However, we did not cover the best craftable dragon bow, because well, that's a little bit more complicated. In current Monster Hunter World, there is a clear winner, which is the best craftable dragon bow. However, in the Iceborne Beta, we did do some testing, and there are potential changes to bow that will change which is the best craftable bow option for bows, as well as how builds will look in the future. Now, obviously, the numbers in the beta are basically dummy numbers that are tentative at best, but it does suggest that this is the direction they may end up going with Iceborne, and is really the best information we have for what Iceborne bow is going to look like. So in this video, I'll be covering the meta sets for the dragon bow options that are craftable, and use that to contextualize what the potential Iceborne changes look like. Alright, so first let's talk about all the dragon bows we haven't talked about yet, basically everything except for the Kiara Decay. So if you've been playing bow for a while, you'll know that the Val Hazak Bow and the Tareth Queen Bow from old KT always fought for the best dragon bow. They kind of went back and forth depending on the new armor additions and new metas that got presented. That fight is now over. The Val Hazak Bow now just wins because armor has made it a lot more efficient and not really made the Queen Bow much more efficient. I don't want to spend too much time getting into it, but basically the Queen Bow requires free element 3. And free element 3 armor pieces haven't really gone much more efficient. On top of that, both sets have to run crit elements, so 2 armor pieces in the loadout are already locked off to being crit element pieces which have low efficiency. In other words, the Queen Bow didn't really get any more efficient as armor pieces got added. For a case study of this, if you look at the Terra Thunder Bow build in the first video in this series, it literally hasn't changed since the first meta bow builds video we made 8 months ago. The Queen Bow suffers from the exact same issues. On the other hand, the Val Hazak Bow has gotten better as new armor pieces have been introduced to the meta. However, we do now also have another contender for best dragon bow other than the Kiara bows, which is the Dragonbone Bow. So to be clear, the Dragonbone Bow wasn't very good in the past. It always fell behind both the Val Hazak Bow and the Tareth Queen Bow for damage outputs. This is because even though it has the highest dragon element out of every dragon bow in the game, the Dragonbone was always behind the others due to a lack of power coatings. Power coatings increase your raw damage by 35%, which is a very big chunk of damage, even though bow is an elemental and raw damage split weapon. Close range coatings, on the other hand, have only an 18% increase to your raw, which is what the Dragonbone Bow has to use because it can't use power coatings. However, with the introduction of stamina surge into builds and just simply better armor pieces in general, the Dragonbone Bow is now considered the second best dragon bow, right behind the Kiara Decay. Now, in a few matchups, the Hazak Bow will actually deal more damage per shot by a small amount, while it has power coatings and the Dragonbone Bow does not. But once you run out of power coatings and are both using close range coatings or both using no coatings, the Dragonbone Bow will win. So that would mean that the Val Hazak Bow is better at short fights, correct? The problem is short fights that are dragon weak are exclusively the Wrath family. And for the Wrath family, you have to be close to their head to combo them properly. So close, in fact, that your rapid shots actually end up being out of the minimum crit distance range due to being too close and lose 20% of their damage. At least with power coatings on. When you have close range coatings, that doesn't become an issue anymore because it basically removes the minimum crit distance for close range shots. In other words, the Dragonbone Bow wins here as well because you end up having to be so close that you would lose 20% of the damage on your rapid shots with the Val Hazak Bow. On top of that, Dragonbone Bow just runs higher levels of stamina surge more easily compared to the Val Hazak Bow. The cost for higher levels of stamina surge tends to be crit boost decos. However, crit boost only affects the raw damage on your bow, and the Val Hazak Bow deals a lot more raw damage and less elemental damage than the Dragonbone Bow. In other words, it just costs you more damage to run these levels of stamina surge on Val Hazak's bow as opposed to the Dragonbone. At the end of the day though, the comparison is fairly close. While the Dragonbone does win, if you are allergic to using close range coatings, you may prefer the Val Hazak Bow. Although the Dragonbone Bow does beat the Val Hazak Bow if both aren't using coatings. Alright, first off, let's look at the Constitution 3 set for the Dragonbone Bow. Pretty standard stuff. This version does run Stamina Surge 1 and is technically the best version of this set because it runs 2 levels of free Bombardier. The Dragonbone Bow is a bit similar to the Kiar bows in that its builds are a bit more flexible, so you can run a variety of different armor combinations to get the same amount of core skills. For example, this alternate build is a bit easier to make, but it does lose those 2 levels of free Bombardier. Oh no, whatever will we do without that Bombardier? However, it also gets the benefit of simply being more flexible. You can sub out the crit boost deco to get the 2nd level of Stamina Surge if you want to run Stamina Surge 2. Very nice. Now, the insanely high base element on the Dragonbone Bow means we run Dragon Attack 4. Technically, it can take the 5th point, but that only gives you 10 more true element, which generally rounds off, so it's not really worth investing into. Now, if you want to run Stamina Surge 3 without losing a lot of damage, you'll have to run the Constitution 1 set. This particular Constitution 1 set is the same as the last build, except for you swap out the Charm and swap out one of the decos. This is the best way to run Stamina Surge 3, but again, we think that's kind of overkill. Stamina Surge 2 is more than enough. Instead, for a Constitution 1 build, this is our recommended set. In exchange for only running Stamina Surge 1, this build runs Attack Boost 4 and an extra level of crit boost compared to its Constitution 3 version. This is a juicy 31.1 EFR increase, which is very nice. This is just hands down the highest DPS Dragonbone build you can really get. Yes, it is nice to have extra Stamina Surge over 1 to get more DPS uptime, but it doesn't really make up for this EFR drop in our opinion. Now, despite the fact that Dragonbone Bow is much better than the Val Hazak Bow, here are some Val Hazak sets. Why, you may ask? Well, first off, if you're allergic to close range coatings and refuse to use them on Dragonbone Bow or the Val Hazak Bow, it is theoretically possible for the Val Hazak Bow due to the 50 or 70 power coatings to kill something faster than the Dragonbone Bow can. The breakpoints on this is really complicated because it's dependent on the hit zone values of the monster, but know that if you kill a monster soon after running out of power coatings, the Val Hazak Bow may be better, assuming you're not using close range coatings on both. Now, the other reason, and the more important reason, is because the Iceborne Beta has shown that it's very likely Bow's elemental damage per shot is going to get nerfed. We will cover that in depth in a second, but it does mean that it's entirely possible that after Iceborne comes out, the Val Hazak Bow will again be the best dragon bow that is not the Kiar Decay Bow. Meaning that if you do not have the Kiar Decay Bow, this will be your best option going into the Iceborne expansion. At least until you farm up those new master rank bows. So this is the new Constitution 3 Val bow with Stamina Surge 1. It runs 2 crit boost and 2 levels of free Bombardier. Neato. Also, if you'd like to have 2 Stamina Surge instead, you just swap out the crit boost deco to a Surge deco. Now, here is an alternate build that is easier to achieve because you don't need to have the Zoragama waist. However, you do lose those 2 points of Bombardier. Oh dear. Also, you lose the option to turn this into a Stamina Surge 2 set because the crit boost does not come from decos. Oh bigger dear. As for Constitution 1 sets, the Stamina Surge 1 build is in our opinion the best. It gains Attack Boost 4 out of it, which is great because the Val Hazak Bow doesn't actually hit 100% affinity without Attack Boost 4. Now, if you want to run higher than Stamina Surge 1, you do have to lose the Attack Boost 4. Whether that's worth it or not to you is up to you, but on screen we do have a Stamina Surge 3 option, which is kind of overkill, but it is 1 Stamina Surge higher than the Constitution 3 build with otherwise no changes. And if you want a Stamina Surge 2 build instead, you can swap out a Surge deco for a Crit Boost deco if you'd like, but personally, if you're going for that, we just recommend using the Stamina Surge 1 build instead because it has much higher damage returns. Alright, so that does cover all of the Dragon Bows, but let's talk about the tentative Iceborne changes. So as for moveset changes, there really isn't much. 1000 Dragons is neat, but I don't really have much to say on it because I haven't really messed around with bow too much in the beta. I have heard that it's potentially very strong with slinger bombs or with piercing pods. I'm still not 100% sold on it because the recovery time is enormous. But there are plenty of bow YouTubers who I'm sure have already covered it in depth. What I'm more interested in is what is looking to be like a very strong nerf to elemental damage on bows going into Iceborne. Again, these numbers are completely tentative, take them with a grain of salt. But it does suggest the direction Capcom may be choosing to go with bow in Iceborne. So there are some numbers floating about from someone who did test it before I got a chance to. Now, I am not 100% certain on the source behind this, But I did go ahead and compare these elemental modifiers versus what we have currently in Monster Hunter World, and we're looking at anywhere from 72% to a 25% loss in elemental damage, which is a lot. However, I did do some testing of my own, and I'm 90% sure these numbers are off. The reason is that these numbers seem to assume that the elemental hit zone value of the training pole in the beta is still 30 like it is in Monster Hunter World currently. However, I did some testing of my own, and as far as I can feasibly possibly test in the beta, the elemental hit zone value is actually changed to 25. So here's the thing, there are a lot of different factors that change elemental damage. You have your effective element, you have your elemental modifier for that particular attack, and then you have the corresponding elemental hit zone value of the thing you're hitting. But attacks also do raw damage as well, so you also have to calculate the raw damage you do and then subtract the total from that to figure out how much elemental damage you actually did. Now, because of all of these factors, the only thing I could reasonably test elemental hit zone values of the pole with was Insect Glaive. The Insect Glaive had both a raw and a dragon element version of the weapon you could use in the beta. Everything else only had either a raw version or an elemental version. And I couldn't do reasonable testing with something like, say, the Fire Dual Blades because I don't know if the motion values also change, so any damage adjustments may come from the motion value changing, not from the hit zone value or from the elemental modifier changing. But with IG, I could use the raw version to test the exact motion values of each attack and then use that to calculate how much raw damage I dealt with the elemental version. Now, I don't want to talk too long on the exact details of this testing, but I will have a link to the full spreadsheet in the description if you'd like to see all the numbers. And again, keep in mind these numbers are tentative, and because of the low amounts of damage we're dealing here, the rounding won't be exact. If something calculates to 24, it's pretty safe to assume it's supposed to be 25, but rounding cut it down. But when I tested the dragon elemental hit zone value of the training pole with IG without any actual buffs on it, it was anywhere from 21 to 31 hit zone value. Now we can go ahead and throw out the 31 hit zone values because those are for the aerial attacks. It's safe to assume that these 31s are because the aerial attacks have higher elemental modifiers now. Now the only attacks that had a 21 or a 22 hit zone value calculation were either the first hit of the rising slash or double slash. Again, pretty safe to assume that these just have a lower elemental modifier attached to the attack. Everything else is either a 23 or a 26. Again, rounding is what's causing these to be variable from 25, but pretty clearly they're all hitting an elemental hit zone value of 25. And yes, I did also test what it looked like with the red buff attacks. Now, red buff by itself doesn't increase the raw at all on IG, but it does change the movesets. Again, everything here is very clearly supposed to be around a 25 hit zone value with the exception of the first hit of your double slash. Based on this data, it is very safe to say the elemental hit zone value of the training pole is 25. The only way it would not be based off of these numbers is if they decided to add a 15% elemental modifier to literally every single attack in the IG's kit. Keep in mind this is entirely possible. Also, this IG does have the element boost Kinsect effect. Now keep in mind this element boost is only for Kinsect attacks in current Monster Hunter World, so it does not affect your IG attacks at all. However, that's also only for current Monster Hunter World. We have no way of knowing if it does affect your IG attacks in Iceborne. I think that's extremely unlikely that they would change that, but again, there's literally no way for us to test this due to the armor and weapon limitations in the beta. Unfortunately, this is the best way for us to test the elemental hit zone value of the training pole. The issue is that every other weapon has too many extra factors added in, notably the extra motion value changes that may be happening for each weapon. I can't even test elemental ammo on the bowguns because they may have changed how the formula works for elemental ammo. So yeah, grain of salt and all of that again, these are obviously tentative numbers and we literally just do not have enough options in the beta to actually test things with a good amount of rigor. That being said, assuming that the hit zone value is 25 instead of 30 for Dragon now, I also did some bow damage testing. So fun fact, when you use a status coating on your bow, you actually remove any status or elemental damage your bow attacks have. This is why blast coatings are terrible. The extra damage you get from the blast procs does not make up for the loss of elements on your bow. This makes it very easy for us to test what the raw motion values of each arrow are at each charge level with each attack, which as far as I can tell they did not change. However, when we look at the elemental damage, we can see that it did in fact get nerfed. Not by as much as we initially thought because we had to adjust the new hit zone value. Instead, we're looking anywhere from a 60% to a 14% nerf in the damage. Although, again, we don't know if these are completely precise because the damage is simply too low, so rounding is definitely an issue here. And to be honest, the only one that's at 60% is going to be Rapid 1, which you should never be using anyway because of the fact that Quickshot exists. So instead, we're looking at a 20 to 42.86% nerf. Unfortunately, we have no idea what it's going to look like on level 4 shots because we could not get Bow Charge Plus in the beta. Now, this is not looking as bad because assuming that the trend continues the level 4 shots, we're probably looking around a 20 to maybe 25 or 30% nerf to elemental damage. Now, with how strong, how obscenely strong Bow is in current Monster Hunter World, this isn't going to kill Bow. Elemental damage is anywhere from 20 to maybe 35% of your damage per shot on Bow. So we take the middle of that, so 27.5% of your damage comes from element, and we're assuming, let's say, a 25% nerf to that. That totals out to only a 6.875% damage drop. That's not huge, but it does mean bows that favor a little more EFR over effective element like the Kjar bows or like the Val Hazak bow are going to be better than before. Raw damage won't have changed, but elemental damage will be weaker, meaning that in these close matchups where one weapon has slightly more raw damage and one has slightly more element, the raw weapons are getting the advantage. If this kind of change goes through, it's very likely that the Kjar King Bow will become the new best fire bow over the Andra Bow. So that is something to keep in mind, is that if in Iceborne they do end up nerfing the elemental modifiers for bows, it may change how we make builds, and it may change which bows are the best. And no, this does not mean that Blast Bow or Raw Bow will become good suddenly. The damage difference between a raw bow versus using an elemental matched bow is so huge, they would have to completely gut the elemental damage on your bows to make it worth it. The raw motion values on bow are just complete trash. Alright, that's all she wrote. As always, of course, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video and learned something new, be sure to like it and leave a comment letting me know what you think about these tentative Iceborne changes. As always, thank you to Honey over at Honey Hunter World for making the tools we use to make sets. And thank you again to Alessia. The background footage you saw during this video did come from her. She is not only one of the moderators over at our Discord server, but she is also a phenomenal bow speedrunner. Link to her channel is in the top right and in the description, be sure to check her out. And speaking of our Discord server, the Mathalos Nest, be sure to check it out if you'd like to find some like-minded hunters to hunt with or just come chat about stuff. We also do have a Twitter, be sure to follow us if you'd like to hear about video updates or just random things that interest us. And be sure to check out Tuna on Twitch, he does stream Monster Hunter World and other games almost every single day. If you enjoy watching Twitch, be sure to follow him because it does help us out a lot. And speaking of helping us out, our videos do take a lot of research time, so if you'd like to help support us directly, be sure to check out our Patreon. And an especially big thank you to MC Persona, Foray, Yoshi Cho, David Sternberg, XCLK07, Haika, Milky Powder, David Ju Sinclair, Warren Kios, Hensatsuken, Wed Manticore, Dr. Awesome Farts, Litha Bowley, Bram Orsel, Anti-Spartan, Lightweight, PB Livingston, Jordan Petit, Skylar Yang, Checkleman, Lupin, Mongus, Kumiko, Triple Agents, Augusto Oliveira, Alan O'Dom, Baguette, Zimv, Billy Barthol, Magister Obscura, Jamie, and every single one of you who supports us on Patreon. You guys are the literal best. Without you guys, we'd be at the whims of the YouTube algorithm, which realistically doesn't really like these kinds of very heavily researched, very long to produce videos. Because of you guys, we don't have to resort to doing clickbait or doing very frequent, very fluffy videos. We can focus on very content-dense, very nicely researched videos like you guys love. Alright, that officially finishes up the Bow Meta series. Next up we do have Charge Blade, and then after that we will be finally covering Tuna's main weapon, the SNS. As it is Tuna's main weapon, we wanted to make sure that we show it plenty of love, so we've been saving it for last. So be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and you will hear about those videos as soon as they come out. Happy hunting, hunters! We'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!